Okay, we're back with Beverley Stone talking about how to be authentic rather than being what everyone else wants you to be. So Beverley, I noticed that you spent much of your early career working with executives and boards. Would you say there was a similarity between working relationships and personal relationships?
Yes, I definitely would. In work, what happens is, during the honeymoon period, and we do call it the honeymoon period, interestingly, you're everything that people wanted you to be when they saw you during your interview. You are sharp, you have a can-do attitude, you're interesting, you're interested, and everything's going swimmingly. But after about 3 to 4 months, a number of people in the organisation will start to look at you and feel both admiration for the way you're working, but also jealousy for the things that you're getting that they don't seem to be able to. So they will start to tell you, oh no, you can't have any more resources, oh no, there's no money in the budget for that, and no, you can't talk to the boss like that, oh no. And then when you're in a team meeting, people will say, oh, we tried that idea, it doesn't work, we tried it last year. And suddenly you start to realise that people actually expect you to behave in a particular way that is the norm of the organisation's culture, and you start to do that. So after the honeymoon period, which we all recognise the term, people become changed. But the problem is they don't change for the better, they generally change for the worse. And the same thing often happens in a relationship. You start off being authentic and being the person you want to be and the person loves you for, but eventually you start to learn to behave as other people around you seem to want you to behave. So you again start to lose part of yourself and become inauthentic.
Okay. In my experience, there was often an element of power play and control politics that comes into play in relationships, where one person often gives in, and then that's how the relationships tends to play out.
Yeah.
Would you agree with that?
I absolutely agree with that, and I think we see that in teams all the time. When you're very, very young, you tend to learn a way of handling conflict. So if one person learns that shouting, slamming doors, screaming and kicking works, they will tend to handle conflict in a fight sort of way. If you learn that running upstairs because somebody else in the family is shouting and screaming, running upstairs, reading a book and waiting till it all blows over works for you, then as an adult you'll tend to go into flight. The problem is, it might have worked as a child, but it's no longer working as an adult, and people don't realise that until I point it out to them. Now, in, for example, work environment in a team, you will find that whereas 1 or 2 people in a team are still using intimidation, whether it be being rather aggressive in the way they put over their point, not necessarily meaning to be intimidating, but that's their habit. Or some people will be passive aggressive when they leave the meeting. You know by their face that they have no intentions of doing what's being said, but they're not going to say it. Then the silent majority who have learnt to accommodate, avoid conflict or compromise will sit there not putting their head above the parapet. So there you have learnt behaviour of how you handle conflict and disagreement as a child, often playing itself out in a team when we become adults. It's very similar in relationships too. One person habitually shouts and the other person will habitually give in anything for peace. That's what does tend to happen, yeah.
Yeah. You mentioned before that you believe that we encounter similar interpersonal politics even at government level. What exactly do you mean by that?
Well, I don't know whether everybody heard it, but I certainly did on Radio 4 in 1996. The late Robin Cook actually said that when the cabinet were deciding whether or not to go to war in Iraq, had it been an anonymous ballot, they would not have voted to go to war. But because everybody could see what they were voting and they knew what Tony Blair and others wanted them to vote, they voted to go to war. Now that's another example of people being inauthentic and not saying what they really mean in the real meeting. You can guarantee that when they broke that cabinet meeting and all rushed off to the coffee machine, everybody was complaining and saying I didn't want to do it and I felt obliged, and then they went home and complained about it. And I think the same thing is happening at work all the time, that there is a silent majority of really good people who are very ethical, who don't like to put their head above the parapet in the team meeting for fear of being disapproved of standing out or whatever their reasons, but do break and go and talk about it at the coffee machine or in the bar at lunch. And again, with the credit crunch, people will say, what on earth was happening in the boardroom? Where were the non-executive directors? And even at board level, a similar thing happens. You'll have one or two people who intimidate because of the manner of arguing their point, and the vocal minority and a silent majority will give in and just accommodate whatever's being said, but I'm sure spoke in the car park afterwards about the decisions they didn't agree with, spoke about it at home, had sleepless nights, but they didn't have the courage of their convictions. Now, there are techniques that I use that help in organisations people to have good relationships where they all feel they can be authentic and that they're living the values of the organisation, like having integrity, being honest, listening to each other, teamwork, can-do attitude. We all know the lists of values in organisations, but they tend to be laminated, not lived, and I get them to be lived, not laminated. So that's how you help a team to start working together authentically and collaboratively. And also at home, you need a facilitator in a relationship where that's not working. You try and help each partner to be collaborative, rational, win-win, unemotional in an argument. But if one of them flares up because their habitual behaviour is fight, or the other one runs because their habitual behaviour is flight, then what we need to do is to have a facilitator, a counsellor in this case, to help them to really listen to what their feelings are and what's underlying their problems and what they really think.